Okay, everyone, welcome back to another episode of Time for Forgiveness. I am Robert Pascuzzi. I'm joined here by Father Don Farnan and, of course, Kelly Pascuzzi. And we're welcoming in Betty Jo Greenlee tonight. And we're really excited to have BJ on with us on this episode. And she's got a powerful message here that she wants to share with you guys. I know this is going to impact a lot of listeners, so we're excited to bring it to you. Before we do that, I just want to again mention that our podcast travels by word of mouth, and we really appreciate if you're being inspired and moved by these episodes. Just share them with your friends and your family and ask them to listen and do the same thing. We really appreciate that. And again, our website is timeforforgiveness.org, and you can follow us on our Facebook and Instagram pages at timeforforgiveness.org. And if we have a listener out there that would like to share their story, as BJ is doing today, about how they move through their journey of faith and forgiveness, we'd love to hear about it, and you can contact us again on our website, Time for Forgiveness. Okay, so I'm going to read BJ's bio here now and just bring her in a minute. So BJ is the founder of Discover Life Coaching and a former victim of emotional and physical abuse who needlessly carried the embarrassment and shame of 2 toxic marriages that ended in divorce. Now, BJ is a victorious survivor who uses everything she learned, climbing out of her pain to help others. Coupling that with 10 years of experience as a mental health advocate, today she guides those who feel lost, don't trust themselves, or know what they want, to rise up and take charge of creating a life they love. Her mission through her personal coaching, online courses, training, and speaking events is to help many discover what lights them up so they can find peace with themselves and give back those special gifts they were blessed with. All right. Well, BJ, welcome in. It's great to have you on the podcast today.
Yes, thank you for having me.
All right. Well, I just like to kind of kick it off here. I was looking at some of the things on your website, and maybe, I think this would be a good segue into this topic. You had mentioned that you had a pattern, the way you described it. It was a pattern that was unhealthy and unsafe, but it was basically getting into very, as you described it, toxic and abusive relationships. Could you kind of pick it up right there, BJ, and tell us, what you meant by that and how those, you feel like looking back in the earlier days of your life, how these relationships started to form and how you invited them in?
Yeah, so I would say at a very early age, I was very performance driven. I did feel like I needed to have validation from my parents to get love. And I know that as a young kid, I definitely had to be perfect in order to have that validation.
You felt like you needed that validation.
Yes. And so taking that on to, with me to adulthood, I picked these men that expected perfection, I guess you would say. And so it was very much, my life was always trying to fix or help or make everybody around me happy in order for me to feel worthy.
Which alone, I have to say, can just feel overwhelming and exhausting, I would guess.
Yes, very much so. I was worn out. I didn't realize I was worn out. I didn't understand why I felt so, I guess, numb, because I was always trying to do something to make people happy. And if they weren't happy or they were angry about something, I would take that personally and think I did something wrong. And it was a pattern of mine.
And then it's like, it sounds like you would not only take it personal, but then you would own it even though you couldn't control how they reacted or the response.
Exactly. Yes. Yes, I would carry that with me until the next thing came up. And so I was carrying a lot of baggage when things weren't going splendidly.
Well, I would guess that you felt also that you were just in a constant state of reacting, which would be somewhat feeling of chaos, I would guess.
Yes. And I tended to, the two men that I ended up marrying definitely had chaotic tendencies. And so I was on eggshells all the time trying to make everything look perfect on the outside. Even though behind closed doors, it wasn't perfect. So that's where the toxic came in.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned, BJ, that you did a very good job covering that up, right? On the outside, it looked like everything was perfect, and you had it all together. It was the picture perfect family, but again, on the inside, it wasn't so great. And do you feel like that's fairly common? Do you see, now that you're in coaching, do you see that as being? It's definitely. I want to say it's the norm, but do you feel like you see that it's prevalent?
Oh, yeah, very much so. And social media doesn't help. When you have that Pinterest perfect family and everybody's sharing their photos and everybody's cleaned up and big smiles on their faces, they don't share the 10 minutes before where the kids are screaming at each other and the daggers are getting thrown, the eye daggers are getting thrown. None of that is shown on social media.
Yeah, it's like this idea that you just are going to conform and make sure that you look just as good, even though most of that isn't always real.
Right.
Yeah. You said something earlier that really just caught my attention in the words, I'm performance driven and I'm looking for validation. And I had heard once what a difference our world would be from proving ourselves to expressing ourselves. And I love your whole story because I believe it has been somewhat of a transformation for you from a feeling of, I have to prove myself that I can be perfect and worthy of all this, to really going inside and doing some inner work and realizing that that's really why we're here, is to start expressing more of who we are. I wanted to ask, because as you're opening up with this, did you ever feel like, as you were saying, that you're just keeping this, outward expression that it's perfect over here, everything's great, we're living the life just like everyone else is, and it's perfect. But inside, it's, behind closed doors, very different. And I bet not many people were aware or able to understand or support. And I guess my question to you is, did you ever feel guided in any way or led, or did you just feel completely alone?
So I definitely had a moment in my life where I did feel guided. And it was one morning, the sun came in through the window and hit my eyelids. And I just woke up differently that day. And a voice, it was God's voice. He spoke to me and he said, "You are a mom and you're a role model for your kids. And you would never want them to stay in a relationship like the one you're in right now.
Mm-hmm.
I never meant for you to live a life like this. And that was definitely a moment in my life that I realized I had to do things differently and change. I had to quit waiting for everybody else to change. I had to quit waiting for my circumstances to get better. It was time for me to be brave and step out and change. And it definitely was the Holy Spirit just pulling at my heart, saying there's so much more for you than this.
That is, it's really beautiful because, I'm sure with the pattern or the habit or the conditioning of how you were living, you probably didn't feel that way about yourself. It was much easier just to think that this is as good as it's going to get and settling.
Yeah. And what was one of the biggest struggles for me is having that label of a divorce, getting a divorce. I definitely carried a lot of weight with that because I had been told if you have enough faith and you pray hard enough, anything can happen. God can do anything, and He absolutely can. But
okay, I want to go back just for a second because you said the label of divorce. What is that label for you, or what were you told, or what did that mean?
So I grew up with that belief that you stick with it, you make it work. I was given the message that you just stick with it and God will work it out. But it was never the fine print wasn't given to me, or I missed it somewhere where it wasn't. God never intended for you to be verbally, emotionally, physically abused. That's not what His intentions were. That is not what He meant for a healthy, sound marriage. And whatever programming I got, I missed that. And so I felt like it was on me to make this work. Mm-hmm. And stepping back and allowing myself to be okay with a failed marriage, 2 failed marriages, that was hard to swallow.
Well,
and I definitely,
especially if you're coming from performance-driven perfectionists, that the whole idea is just that you failed.
Yeah. That and you, in the back of your mind, it's the words, what are people going to think? Mm-hmm. What are they going to say? What are they going to think?
Yeah.
And
go ahead, BJ. I'm sorry.
I just was going to say it's almost like a poison of, we're so worried about what other people's opinions are of us instead of stepping back and realizing that God doesn't have that opinion of us, of the negative opinion or judgment of all the things we've done wrong, and keeping a track record of our mess ups and mistakes. But we sure carry that with us, in that he's just waiting to strike us down any moment because we're just such a screw up.
Right. Yeah. Like God's some deity up there with a white beard sitting on a cloud getting ready to judge us, right? So no.
Right.
Yeah, well,
Right.
you know what? I really admire you, BJ, for having the courage to step out of that and start taking some new action, right? And I know you did that very thought out, and you had a way that you went about that was successful for, I think, everybody involved, including your ex-husband. So I commend you for that. But just to have the courage, again, to realize that this isn't a healthy environment, and you can't stay in that, because it's not, at the end of the day, it's not serving anybody, including the person who's in it with you, because they don't know what they don't know, and they're not aware that this is toxic and this is not good, and things, if they keep going down that path, could end in a very detrimental way. So again, I hear you saying the theme of the day, I think, here is courage, but also awareness and understanding that you need to make a change.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
Okay. BJ, go ahead.
change is, I was going to say, it's change is not easy. If it was easy, everybody would do it.
Mm-hmm.
We get so comfortable with the predictable and the norm that when we finally do realize that we need to step out and do the work and change, we realize what a hard road that's going to be, and it's going to take some time, and it's going to take some gentleness and patience with ourselves to really heal and get where we need to be.
Well, those are some big words just to sit and ponder with ourselves, how often we are being gentle, patient, and kind with ourselves. I would guess that for most of us, it's easier to offer that to others than it is to ourselves, but it's something we definitely should be offering ourselves, and it feels great when we do.
Yeah, we are our worst critic, and being gentle and patient with ourselves and allowing ourselves to get to a place where we realize we are where we're supposed to be, and mistakes are lessons.
Mm-hmm.
It's easier said than done, but getting to that place, it does take time, and just forgiveness of ourselves and where we're at is where we're supposed to be. I would say one of the biggest healing, I guess you call it, tools, was me being able to speak out the truth, because I was hiding the truth for so long. When I finally got to speak it out and speak out all the things I was hiding and holding and trying to conceal, that was so healing, because I was in a place where I could speak out and actually name the things that I was holding back, and that totally changed my mindset.
Yeah.
So that was probably my first step in healing, was being able to actually speak out what was going on in truth.
Right. There are so many households that have a sense that they think that everything is okay on the exterior. And it's interesting that your husband at the time would have said everything was perfect. He didn't realize that anything was wrong. Now, he knew he was drinking. He may not have called it alcoholism, but he knew that things were not on an objective level perfect. But for him, it was perfect. He thought it was. And there are just an awful lot of people that have dichotomous lives like that, where there's the the devil on the inside and the angel on the outside, or whatever are the darkness and light variables that we talk about. But you were given a good gift, and part of it goes back to your childhood of having a self-awareness, an identity, an understanding of who you are. You may not have gotten it perfectly. You may not have understood everything, but you kind of knew who you were and why you made some of the decisions that you made. And maybe even in that marriage, you weren't quite aware, but you became more aware. And so you go through these levels of awareness, and you get to a deeper awareness. And once you get to that sense of a realization of what you can become, then the habits that you had in the beginning, which were probably not good habits, they're just things that you did because that's who you were. Once you realize who you are, you develop all kinds of different ways of being, these habits, these patterns, these decisions, these choices, just the behaviors that you have. And it changes everything. So again, I think that there are a lot of listeners that would say, this is a wonderful thing to have somebody out there like a life coach who can help me to get to that different level of awareness that I can become someone different.
Yes, it was totally, it was a whole new perspective that I had not been open to. And I definitely had to step into, why did it take me so long?
Mm-hmm.
Why did it, 23 years?
Right.
Hello, am I really that dumb? But, the Holy Spirit just was very wonderful in showing me, this is a journey I took you through for a reason. And you didn't do anything wrong. I'm taking you through this for a reason. And it's time to be gentle with yourself. It's time to let go of the perfection and really forgive yourself before you can really heal. You're not going to be able to move forward. And so it did take, and I'm still working on it. It's not, it's not like you master forgiveness, because we are so judgmental and critical of ourselves.
I was gonna. I'm just gonna
Go ahead.
comment that sometimes the most difficult one to forgive is ourselves, and I love the word, starting to be gentle with myself. And would you share, what did that look like?
So for me, it was getting back to I'm a creation and God doesn't make junk. So celebrating all those wonderful things about me that are so unique and such a blessing, and letting go of those things we laser focus on that we're so judgmental about. It could be our appearance physically. It could be the things that we do that maybe we feel like we're not smart enough, or we feel like we don't say the right things in the right way. I mean, there's so many things we can just judge ourselves about, and we are our worst critic. So coming to the point where it's like, what is a good thing about me? It's as simple as that, is what can I celebrate about myself, instead of constantly striving for that. Oh, that was dumb. Oh, you could have done that so much better. Oh, look at all the wrinkles on your face. I mean, pick a topic.
Right. Anything.
That we are so hard on ourselves about. And what would God say about that? He loves you the way you are. He made you the way you are. Basically, when you're criticizing yourself, you're telling God, you didn't do a good enough job.
Well, not just God, but our Blessed Mother also. We can all relate to a mother's love. And Pope Francis speaks an awful lot about Our Lady, the undoer of knots. I don't know if you've heard of this, but it's one of the images of Mary that just helps us to get rid of all of these problems in our life, undoing a lot of knots. And probably at that time in your life, you had a lot of knots to have undone. And if you can, do one, you figure that there are, you made a step. Again, it's all about getting to a better place. And that's what I think our listeners really want to relate to is getting to a better place. But you had an awful lot of knots to untie, didn't you, during that time?
Yes, I did. And it wasn't, okay, we live in a culture that we want to have it your way. We are a fast food, get it done. Why isn't it happening soon enough? Culture. We want to be better now. and so this was also a time for me to learn you got to be patient with yourself, because it took me 23 years of being married to a person that was very, very toxic to, cause all those knots, the abusive language, the just physical things that were done to me. There was a lot of knots to untie. So in thinking that was all going to be healed in a day or a week or even 6 months was crazy to expect of myself.
Mm-hmm.
So when I would step into, I've got to deal with this now, a new challenge, a new issue, instead of having that idea that I should be over this,
right.
It's more step back and say, okay, now what's next?
Mm-hmm.
And God walking me through that, okay, now let's deal with this. Okay, you've got a handle on this. Now let's deal with this. And him very gently walking me through that process.
Right. And allowing yourself the space to do that and the time, as you said, like that everything was happening in perfect timing, and it always does. But sometimes we can't see that.
Right.
You
and
mentioned patience.
That's hard.
Oh, it is hard. BJ, you're talking about patience. Actually comes from a Latin word patior, which means to suffer. And so you're suffering through a lot of things at that time, and it's going to take a lot of patience, and it's going to take a lot of time, and it's going to. But I'm saying this in the sense that suffering is not a negative thing. I mean, obviously, that's there is the negative part. There is the negativity of it, but it's leading to something that's far greater. And kind of fast forwarding now, you are helping other people to untie knots, and you're helping other people to realize they can't control everything, but they can do something. And what they can do is going to help them to move a step closer to who they were created to be and who God wants them to be and who they ought to be, and reaching a sense of their own. If it's not self-awareness, at least it's something, and it could even lead to something far greater than that, of a self-actualization, of getting to where you really want to be in life. So is that true that today you're helping others who have been in similar situations to you to get to that better place?
Absolutely. And what is amazing about a lot of the individuals I coach is many of the things they struggle with, yes, I went through and maybe still be going through. So it's like a divinely appointed meeting. When I do have clients come to me, they're ready to change. They're ready to do something differently. But also, I think what they don't realize is, as I'm giving to them, they're giving back to me. It's an exchange, and it's just amazing how the process works. Many of the things that they're going through, either I went through or I might have just went through, and I need to hear the words I'm saying just as much as they do.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
your biggest challenges are your greatest gifts.
Mm-hmm.
And we can't see it often that way. But many times in the Bible, God says, those are your weaknesses are where I can work through you. If you think you shouldn't have any weaknesses, how can I perform those miracles?
One of the things that I've just been wanting to ask you is I was taking a peek at some of the things that you were sharing, and you were talking about how early on you felt that you were betraying yourself in the regards to really developing who you were and what you wanted. And those are two such big ideas that most people cannot answer and they really aren't aware of. And I'm just curious now, as you have gone through these situations and God has used those for good and has prepared you to move into this next phase, how would you answer that now if someone asked you who you felt you were and what you really wanted?
So yes, those are big questions. And yes, Kelly, it's hard for people to answer that because they're so busy sometimes living their lives for others and what others want so they can get that approval or validation or that acceptance. So if I were to answer that now, my drive is wanting to help others get to that place that they feel they know exactly what their talents are, what they've been gifted with, what drives them to get up in the morning, a new leaf on life, helping them discover that. That's definitely something I want to help others do. And who I am is a mom that has adult children now that did the best she could and forgave herself for the crazy, toxic situation she was in. She's a mom that's being a role model now and setting boundaries and just teaching her kids how to set boundaries so they don't have to go through the same thing she did.
That's great.
And
that's great, BJ.
Same thing for the people that I coach. They don't have to go through the same things I did because I definitely took the long route. So
many of us have in many different ways.
Yeah.
So that's very true. Yeah. BJ, you mentioned too, I think you had told me on another call that, how did your kids react when you kind of told them, hey, enough is enough and you're not going to put up with it anymore? What was their response?
I was sitting at the kitchen table with them and I had already determined months before that it was time for me to go, but I had to wait for it to be a safe time where I knew all of them would be safe and I would be safe. But what my kids told me was, what took you so long? And it was true. It was kind of hard to swallow that. I know they realized I was waiting for a safe time, but also it was like, why did you wait so long? And then later on, as things unfolded, they realized you were just keeping everybody safe. You were making sure that it was the right time. It was only when you were ready. And that's so true. It was the stars had to align everything had to be in the proper time when I could go.
And so today, what do you think the biggest lesson from all this that your kids might take away? Maybe you've had these conversations. What do you think they learn from all this?
Honestly, they have learned that people can portray on the outside that everything is good, life is totally perfect, but there's often a hidden person, I guess you would say, on the inside. They are very aware of people that are manipulative and can say one thing and do something totally opposite, to not just take their word at face value, because there were so many promises broken throughout their childhood, that they realized that not everybody is trustworthy. Not everybody is, and especially as people, as believers, we're taught that we've got to be, sacrificial and just help everyone. But there's a boundary, and they definitely learned those boundaries through just the life that they lived as kids.
BJ, I think one of the most powerful things that I'm gaining from this conversation today has to do with how we don't go through life alone. We sometimes think we need to, and we sometimes try to do it alone. But we get realizations that we really can't. And our Catholic Church also kind of teaches that we don't get to heaven alone either. We're a community. We're a communion of saints. We get there with one another. So it's really that sense of Jesus and his accompaniment, that he accepted people where they were. He walked with them. He guided them, and he took them to another step, to a better place. And you, through the life coaching field, and me through spiritual direction, and Kelly and Robert, and they're talking with people, whether it's one-to-one or whether it's with the small groups, people can get to a better place. And they can do that through that sense of accompaniment, to realize that we're not alone. We don't have to ever be alone, though sometimes we feel like we are alone. And I've got to do everything. I've got to protect my children. I've got to weather through this horrible relationship. I've got to deal with misery because I think my church has taught me that I have to do this. But it doesn't. We need to realize that we don't go through it alone. And I often use that image of Jesus and his cross, that he didn't carry that cross alone either. So it's a great thing that you're doing. And I hope that any of our listeners out there who are in a tough situation where they feel like they're carrying quite a burden, that they will also come to that same sense of that light shining on their face, to realize they don't have to live like that. And that there are people that can help, and whether they're angels in disguise or the Holy Spirit that's leading them through, but they don't have to go through it alone. There are people to reach out to.
Well, as you say that, Father Don, you had mentioned, that people are going along with us and we don't have to go through it alone. And it was just a beautiful part of the podcast, BJ, when you shared that, the sun came through and you heard the voice. We're not always listening to that voice, though, because it doesn't seem logical. Like, how would that happen? How could I ever do that? But you listen to that voice and the feeling of being led, and that's really a beautiful thing. I appreciate you sharing that, because I do believe that instinct is perfect, and if we're listening.
Mm-hmm. And just that you had the courage. You had to find the courage, and that was a big part of it, right, BJ? I mean, sometimes we have to really dig deep to do things that we have put off, but we know that we have to do it, or in your case, it could have been very detrimental, but you knew you had to do it, and you found the courage, and you took the action, and here's where you are today. So that's the manifestation of that belief, and knowing that God is going to open the door for you, or the doors, and you will be taken care of and protected.
Yes. He never leaves us. He promises that. So, yes, it was leaving the comfort of familiar, because it sounds crazy, but even in that dysfunctional lifestyle, it was familiar for me. I knew
it was the
how
known.
to handle it.
Right.
Yeah.
Even though you didn't like it, and you knew it wasn't wasn't healthy or serving you, but you knew what it was, even though you didn't. Again, you did. It was the unknown that you feared, correct?
Correct. So, and yes, that leaving that dysfunction, that's why it's kind of hard for people on the outside looking in, saying, why do these people stay in these relationships? And it's because they've survived it this long. They've survived it, and so they know they can still survive it.
Right, and it's also a
very
habit pattern,
crazy.
right? Would you say it's a habit pattern, BJ? Because it's just what's gone on. It's what they know. It's what they're comfortable with, even though they don't like it. But they don't like it enough to leave, right? I mean, at some point,
right.
I think there's that moment that you said, and that's a good moment in any scenario in life. I think that's negative is getting to the point where you say, "I've had it. I've had it. No more." And that's what you did.
Yeah.
That's. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that cycle of abuse, if anybody understands or knows the cycle of abuse, I got very addicted. Even though I wasn't an addict, I got addicted to, I knew that there was going to be some turmoil. There was going to be some toxic, crazy something happen. But I knew that I got addicted to the sweet person that my husband could be after all of the chaos and the crazy and the toxic happened. I knew that he would come around and be a sweet person again. And so I just knew that circle would happen, and I got very comfortable with that.
So you mean that was kind of, in your mind, was that the payoff at the end that kept you there? Is that kind of, in a way? Tony Robbins has this saying that we don't engage in any behavior, even if it's destructive behavior, we wouldn't engage in it if there wasn't something we perceived that we were benefiting from. There had to be a benefit.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if he says it exactly like that, Father. Something like that.
I think you said it pretty well. Yeah. I tell you, the word courage, Robert, you said it, and I think that's kind of the word of the day for me. And BJ has that, and she's sharing that with other people, and encouragement, and she's giving that courage to others. And at the middle of the word is courage, is core, which means of the heart. So to always act of the heart, and you go back to the heart of who you are. But anyway, it guides us. So again, I applaud you and appreciate all that you're doing, BJ. Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, I got to ask you a question, BJ, because there is some similarity in regards to the story of the ravine. And it's where this community and dear friends have no idea of what's going on. We think we do, what is shown on the outside of what you had said. Let's just make this picture perfect, or this picture perfect, perfect picture. Thank you. We will edit on that. So we're going to make this picture perfect. And I'm just, in one way, I was so sad because I couldn't help. I didn't even know. And I'm curious in your inner circle and your network and your community? Was this somewhat of a shock? No one knew, or did you feel you had somewhere to go for support?
I definitely was a master at covering up the crazy. And I would say there were many family members, close friends that had no idea what was going on behind closed doors, because I was so good at masking it and covering it up and making everything look picture perfect. And so, yes, when I did finally tell my inner circle that I was leaving, I think a lot of people were shocked, and some of them challenged me, like, do you realize divorce is a sin? Do you realize what you're doing? And what was so, I guess, one of the truths I stood on was, I don't feel safe. And I do not have to defend my safety. And that message for me was all of it. I didn't have to validate why I was doing what I was doing, because I didn't feel safe. And so when people challenged me with that, they would step back, because I don't think they realized what I was dealing with.
But that also is another layer of courage, to have your voice and be convicted in a knowing that you are worthy of something different, regardless of someone else's opinions or suggestions. I'd like to take it one step further with this. You had mentioned earlier that, you really struggled early on with forgiveness for yourself. And, we're obviously our hardest critics, but I'm sure there's a layer of forgiveness in a lot of other areas of your life. And where are you with those?
So forgiveness, I had to forgive my husband for the things that he, had done to me. And at first it was a struggle, because he almost demanded forgiveness. It was like, you're a Christian and you should forgive me. And so I had to really take a step back and be like, I get to forgive when I'm ready to. And I did realize that me holding any type of unforgiveness was keeping me held back. But I had to walk through that process in my time, not him demanding it from me or forcing me to do it. I had to take it at my pace when I was ready. And when the time came, I was ready. And I remember writing him a note. And I didn't give it to him, because I knew if I did, it was just going to cause an argument, and he'd be very defensive. He would just try to have any excuse for what he did and why he did it. But I wrote him a letter of all the things that had happened. And at the bottom, I just wrote, I forgive you. And I crumpled it up, put it in a campfire, and that was kind of my, I'm done. It's forgiven. And just doing that activity seems very simple. But for me, that was kind of the step I had to physically take in letting it all go.
Well, boy, that was powerful stuff, BJ. What would your message be? I'd like to wrap up with this last question. What would your message or advice be to somebody who is in the exact same situation, or is sitting there going, BJ's telling me my story, what would your advice be to them right now? What would you tell them? How would you encourage them to start thinking and acting? What do they need to do right now?
So the very first step is getting honest with yourself. Because I think in a situation similar to what I was in such denial that there was anything wrong. I thought I could take on anything that was happening and fix it. And so it takes that courage that we just talked about to step back, take the time you need, and get very honest with what's really going on. And if you have to say it out loud, if you have to write it down, somehow getting it out of your mind and talking to somebody, telling your story, writing it down, whatever feels safe and true for you, getting completely honest and transparent about it is, I would say, the very first step. Mm-hmm. But it does take courage. It's not an easy step. If it was easy, we would all do it.
If the bull didn't have horns, everyone would be a matador, right? Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Well, and then I think the other thing is, I know from our perspective, Kelly and I have invested a lot of money over the years in coaching and mentorship, and I know that's what you offer now as well. So you would probably tell people to find somebody that can help you be, a mentor, a coach, somebody that can help you understand what the right steps are, but then also I think equally important is holding you accountable.
Absolutely. And that's the biggest step, is finding somebody that you trust, that you know you're safe with and feel very comfortable with. And there's got to be that, when you find that right person, you'll know. And you'll just click. And it's almost like a divine appointment. And what is just so amazing about having a coach that's the right coach is they're holding a version of you that you don't see yet. And they will keep you accountable to that version of you that you might not know is there yet. And that's part of their job, is taking off the layers that have been you've piled up for so long, just taking those layers off a little bit at a time and finding that best version of you that you're supposed to be.
Very well said. All right. Well, I think Kelly has one more question here, or thought, BJ, and then we're going to let you go. Okay. This has been awesome, though. I really appreciate you, sharing your heart and being so transparent. I know you're helping many people.
It's kind of becoming a signature question to ask, what is your meaning of forgiveness?
My meaning would be letting that person go. Well, I guess I would say there's actually an activity that I walk my clients through, and it is that person that you need to forgive, actually thanking them for being a part of your life, because they have been put in your life to teach you a lesson that you've needed to learn. And that is really hard to put in that perspective.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say that would be what forgiveness is to me, is thanking them for, you were in my life for a reason, and it was a lesson I needed to learn.
It's very powerful. I really appreciate you sharing that. That's a very different perspective, but a very powerful one.
Thanks, BJ. You know, I was trying to get this together with this idea of giving, of forgiving and Thanksgiving, but you kind of brought it all together for me and to get that whole sense. So even in this, we should be grateful. Right. And if we have those hearts of gratitude, it brings us that much greater awareness and that much closer to our destiny and our God.
Very inspiring, BJ. Where, if we have somebody in the audience that would like to get a hold of you, where can they reach you at?
So my website is lifecoachdiscover.com, or you can find me on Facebook under Betty Jo Greenlee.
Okay. Facebook, Betty Jo Greenlee. All right. Well, this has been fantastic, BJ, and thank you again. And all you listeners, we will continue to have these inspiring conversations. That's really what we're doing. We're bringing, I think, awareness through education. And you just educated a lot of people today, BJ, with your transparency and then, your wisdom and advice. So, again, thank you. Wish you the best. And to all of our audience, until we see you guys on the next podcast, live with passion. Thanks so much.